Hello, good evening. Welcome to St. Peter's in Hove. I'm Father Alexander. And just have a look in our 51st step in our walking tour through the Bible at Deuteronomy chapter 24. Now, Deuteronomy is, of course, a Deuteronomic code. And so we have a bundle of laws and regulations. Now, chapter 24 is of great interest, largely because this provision in chapter 24 is still with us. I'm talking about the first 4 chapters, which are to do with divorce. Now it says, suppose a man has taken a wife and consummated the marriage, but she has not pleased him, and he has found some impropriety of which to accuse her. He has therefore made out a writ of divorce for her and handed it to her, and then dismissed him from his house. She leaves his home and goes away to become the wife of another man. Now, this is extraordinary. The wife can be dismissed as one would dismiss a servant, sacked. Clearly, she's not pleased him. So he got married. He didn't like the wife. After a time, he said, well, I'm getting rid of her. And he hands her a writ of dismissal, and she leaves his house. Alternatively, he's found some impropriety in her. She burnt the porridge, so he gets rid of her. Please note the impropriety cannot be adultery, because adultery carries a death sentence. And if she's been committing adultery, she wouldn't be divorced, she'd be executed. So the impropriety is less than adultery. It's something that's just displeased the husband. Then, of course, it goes on to talk about what the wife does next, the ex-wife does next. Then suppose this second man, then she goes and marries another man. And then it says, suppose the second man who has married her takes a dislike to her, makes out a writ of divorce for her, and hands it to her and dismisses her from his house. Or if this other man who took her as his wife dies, her first husband, who has repudiated her, may not take her back as his wife. Now she's been made unclean in this way. Very strange that she can't remarry her first husband. So that's because she's been polluted because the second husband has slept with her. That is the obvious implication there. What's extraordinary here is that the law of Moses allows this divorce. And of course, looking at this, we immediately realize that the society for which this law was written was rather different from our own. And also the society for which this law was written had a very different understanding of sexual relations, of marital relations, and indeed of human dignity. First of all, the wife could be dismissed simply for being unpleasing. This is completely wrong. You can't just send somebody to the trash heap because they failed to please you. When you take on a wife, you take her on for life. It's not as though you've hired somebody and then you sack them. The wife is not a hired hand. She is your wife. And as your wife, she has rights. She has the rights of a wife. She has the dignity of a wife. The wife in this passage is assumed to have no dignity at all. Her feelings don't come into it. So she might have grown old. She might have ceased to please. So off she goes. It's against justice. And it's against justice, not only because when the wife is old and so on to get rid of her in this way, but it's against justice in that it fails to recognize what is due to a human being as a human being. This is a fundamentally unjust law. The other thing is, of course, it talks of the writ of dismissal. In other words, you've got to do the paperwork. You can't just say to the wife, off you go. You've got to do the paperwork, but the paperwork is completely one-sided. The wife has no comeback. The paperwork presumably is so that the wife can show this writ of dismissal to the prospective second husband to show that she is free to marry again. Now, what does this mean? It means essentially you can be one man's wife, then you can be another man's wife, and then you can be a third man's wife, and so on. You're just not allowed to go back to the first husband or the second husband, but you can carry on progressively, third husband, fourth husband, fifth husband, and so on. So what is commitment that the wife is making to the husband, or more importantly, we should ask, the husband is making to the wife, given that he can dismiss her as soon as he gets to be bored with her? What is the commitment he is making? This contract, this marriage contract, is by no means there's a word I'm looking for here which I don't quite it's rather escaped me. It's by no means exigent. As I say, the contract is by no means taxing. This is a contract that you can enter into, knowing that the writ of dismissal can set you free. In other words, the contract is not something that is to be taken very seriously. Now, we believe as Catholics that sexual intercourse is a very serious matter, don't we? We also believe that when two people come together, they come together for life, whether they like it or not, that somehow or another, there's almost, if you like, an imprint is made on the body by the body of the other, and they are joined for life. Indeed, Jesus Christ, when talking of divorce, goes back to the book of Genesis and says, this is why a man leaves his mother and father and joins himself to his wife, and the two become one flesh. There's absolutely no hint here that they become one flesh. The wife is just yet another employee in the household, or in fact, employee, or almost like a slave, in fact. So that's very strange, isn't it, this law here? And I think one of the things you get about laws, and this is something I picked up from my canon law course at the Gregorian University, one of the things about laws, every law has an understanding of human nature behind it. Here, human nature is seen as something rather paltry. Let's say wives can be dismissed just like that, and the relationship between a husband and wife can be dissolved just like that, and you can enter into multiple marriages just like that. So the understanding of human relations is very paltry. The other thing is the culture behind the law. Every law has a culture behind it. The culture is clearly one in which women are not valued. And the other thing is that men do not value their relations with women. One wife or another wife, you can replace her as you see fit. In other words, there is no sense of the relationship you're entering into being a groundbreaking, life-changing, life-affirming relationship. So it's very strange. Is that what we want in our own society? A society in which people can just dissolve a marriage just like that with a piece of paper. Divorce is just a piece of paper. And as soon as you start saying divorce is just a piece of paper, you also start saying marriage is just a piece of paper. So the marriage, the piece of paper that is the marriage, is replaced by the piece of paper that is the divorce. And the relationship, what does that count for? Very little. Yet at the same time, if we just look at 24 further down, we do have some really good stuff here. So, for example, verse 10, if you're making your brother a loan on pledge, you must not go into his house and seize the pledge. Whatever it may be, you must stay outside. The man to whom you're making the loan must bring the pledge out to you. In other words, you don't, have some respect for the poor man, is what it's saying. And then, of course, and if the man is poor, you must not go to bed with his pledge in your possession. You must return it to him at sunset so he can sleep in his cloak and bless you. It'll be an upright action, your part in God's view. And of course, there is, of course, the law against usury, which is to say lending stuff and then squeezing the person you've lent money to for cash. So in other words, the poor have rights. The poor have dignity. But rather oddly, this doesn't extend to wives. Now, why is that? Now, all these people who say that Christianity has done nothing for women, all I can say is, well, Christianity has clearly done something for women because it has placed them on the same level as men when it comes to relationships, the marriage relationship, as is quite clear from reading the New Testament. This divorce law is an anti-feminist divorce law. And an anti-feminist divorce law exists in an anti-feminist society, a society in which women are not valued. The poor are valued, but not, it seems, the poor woman. There you go. Hope you have a good evening. Bye.